Hi and welcome to another tutorial for Access users. In this tutorial we're going to start creating the second of our tables for the database, and that is the customer table. Now, as you can see here from my planning list, here are the fields that I'll be putting into the table: ID, first name, last name, address, which could be the street, house number and street name for example, city, postcode or zip code if you like, telephone number, and the date of birth, which might be relevant to a video store. The only change I made from the original list was that I've split the name into first and last name, which is something you would certainly do in a real scenario because it might be useful to sort on the surname, for example, which you wouldn't be able to do if you had a field that contained the full name. Okay, so we'll create the table by clicking the New button on the database window. Again, make sure that Tables is highlighted in your object list. So New, Design View is the route that I go down. Click OK, and we have the design grid open up. And as you know, you have the 3 columns: field name and data type, and the description if you want to add some kind of information about the field. And further down we have the properties, which we'll be setting as we work through the table. So first field is customer ID, and that will be an auto number. So as the previous table, we're going to use this field as a way of uniquely identifying the record, and I'll make no changes in the field properties for this one, leave it as it is. So come down to field number 2, and this will be first name. Tab across. I'll leave that as text, and I'll leave the properties field size, or the text field size, as 50 characters. But I will change the requirement. Again, I want to make that as a required field, so somebody has to type in the first name, and I will not permit a 0 length. So these 2 fields I'm going to keep the same for most of this table. So it's required, so somebody has to enter something in the field, and I won't allow a blank entry as a valid entry. Okay, so moving down there, we have the last name of our customer. Again, leave as text, again leave the characters. So again, the only changes is it's required, and 0 length will be no. Whoops, missed that one for some reason. Try again. There we go. Next field is address. Whoops, spell address correctly. And this one I will increase the field size a little bit to maybe 100 characters, because I've only got one address line, so that could include a primary street and then a secondary street. And I'll make that required as well. So this time, instead of actually clicking the drop down, what I'm going to do is highlight the no, and then just press Y on the keyboard. Then I'm going to tab down and press the letter N. That's just a little tip for you. Rather than keeping on clicking and selecting as I was, you just use the keyboard shortcut or the first letter of the word, and it'll set that property. Okay, so we have 100 characters, field size required is yes, and 0 length is no. So moving down, we have city. Again, I'll leave this one as 50 characters. Again, just highlight the no in required, press Y for yes, tab down, N for no, and then click down to my next field, and this will be postcode. Or if you're in the US, you can put zip code in. Again, leave that as text. Now, postcodes in the UK are quite short, so I can actually reduce that field size to something like 12 characters. That'll be more than enough for our postcodes, which actually are probably 10 or less in fact. But 12 is fine. Again, required, I will make that a yes, tab down, and 0 length is no. Again, just click down now to the next field. We have the telephone number. Now again, this is something you could divide up into the area code and the main number. I'm just going to combine the 2 in my field. Now again, because a telephone number is a number, you might think, well, I'll set maybe the data type to be a number. But whenever you do that, you have to consider whether or not you'll be doing any calculations on the field. If you're not going to do any calculations, leave it as text, because it doesn't make really any difference, and it gives you a bit more flexibility in terms of formatting. So you could separate the area code from the main number, for example, using some field formatting. I'm not going to do anything like that, but I'm just going to leave it as plain text with no formatting, As you can see, I've got format and mask options there, which I'll come to in a future tutorial. The field size, I'll reduce it down to 30. Hopefully nobody has a number longer than that, and I will make it a requirement. So again, yes, required, tab down, and no for zero length, which I explained in the previous tutorial if you want to go and have a look at that. And the last one I've got here is date of birth. And obviously I'm going to set this to be a date and time property. And if we come down to my field properties here, the format I can select by clicking the drop down there. Whoops, catch it there. And I'll just set it to a what should we have? We'll have a short date. Now you see short date there includes 2 digits for day, 2 digits a month, and 4 digits for year, which is perfect for what I need. On required, I'll set that to yes, so Y for yes, and this time if I tab I go into a different property called index. Now I'm not going to bother setting the index on it. Again, I explained that in a previous video. It's basically about increasing the speed of the searches on your database, which with a typical computer these days probably won't make that much difference on a say a database with a couple of thousand records. However, you'll notice that there is no allow zero length option here, and the reason for that is on a date field that option simply isn't relevant, so there's nothing to set there. And really that's my table created. So I'm going to set the primary key. Again, this tells Access which part of the database is the thing that uniquely identifies the record, which as we know is the customer ID. So just click anywhere in the customer ID field, click on my little key button there, sets the primary key, then I need to save it, click save button, and I'm going to call it customers. There we are. Press enter and we're done. And just finally, if I click on the show the data sheet view, so there we are, ready to enter the first record. Click into first name and we'll type in our first customer. Address, what should we call it? 14 something like that. And city, you're going to put in a made up city here. If you've ever read Roy the Rovers, you'll know where Fulchester is, or maybe not. Postcode, again, just make any old thing up there. Telephone number, doesn't really matter. And date of birth, just tab across to that. And date of birth, we will have 15th of May 79, let's say. Okay, so 15/05/1979. So again, with the date of birth, because I set the format, I just had to enter the basics of the date, and Access automatically, for example 79, recognised that it should be 1979 as opposed to 2079, which is useful. And that's it. So there's my first record. I'm going to close that table down. Okay, so we have our first two tables created. So then the last table to create here is this rentals table. Now the only thing I'm going to leave off this time is the late fee field at the bottom there, and we'll leave that one out for now and come back to it later on in the project. So I'm just going to move that to one side and we will start to create this table. So first thing, of course, is make sure you have tables highlighted. Always a good idea if you're creating a table in the object list there. Click on New, click on Design View, click OK. That's one way of doing it anyway. Okay, so let's get started. So first field name is rental ID. Again, very familiar. I'm going to tab across, and this time I'm just going to show you a keyboard shortcut. Just if I press the letter A, it puts auto number in for me automatically. I can then tab through to the next field, and the next field is going to be the date of rental. Tab across and I can type the letter D for date. Again, just tab through. The next field is going to the movie rented, and so here I want to access the list of movie titles from my movies table in the form of a lookup. So first things first, just tab across into the data type. I'm going to click on the drop down this time and choose lookup wizard. Now the thing I want is already highlighted where it says I want the lookup column to look up the values in a table or query. Well, it's in a table, so that's okay. Just click on next, and those are my two tables that already exist. So I'm going to click on movies, click next again, and here are my fields from the movies table, and I can simply click this arrow here to move across the movie ID and the movie title. And that's all I need to put into my lookup column. The movie ID part is important because that's what links the tables together. Okay, so that's the primary key from the movies table, which will link to the primary key in the rentals table. So those are my fields. Click on next. And here I've got the option to sort the list. I'm going to choose the title. So they'll be sorted alphabetically on the film title. Click on next. And there's an example of what I will see. Obviously I only have one film title entered into my movies table, so that's all I see here. This thing here, the key column, if I take the tick out of that checkbox there, you'll see it pops up the movie ID field. Now I don't really want to see that, so it is a good idea to hide that key column, and it does say recommended there, which I agree with. Okay, so once that's sorted, we click on next again, and here we can have a label or a name for the lookup column, and I'm just going to leave it as movie rented. Perfectly okay. Click on finish, and what will happen then is we'll get a warning message from Access which tells us that the table must be saved before it can create a relationship. So I'm going to get two warning messages here. The first one is to save the table, which is obviously a good idea, and the second one will be to say that I haven't actually selected a primary key for this table. So it'll go through the process of helping me create both those things, or save and then create the primary key. So I'll save first, and this is going to be the rentals table, so I shall type in the table name rentals, click OK, and here's my second warning, which is to say there's no primary key defined, and if I say to Access OK, choose a primary key, I'm going to click on yes, and if we go back to the rental ID, you will see the little key symbol is now indicated on in the rental ID field name. So that is my primary key, which is what I wanted anyway. If for some reason I didn't want that as a primary key, I can simply click in that field name and click on the primary key button, and that takes the primary key symbol away, and I can choose another field, for example date of rental, and set that as a primary key if I want. So the primary key button here just acts as a switch on and off. So I'm going to go back and reset the rental ID as a primary key, so just click into rental ID, click my primary key button, and that's now reset as the primary key. Okay, so moving on to the fourth field, and this is going to be the customer field, so let's type in there the word customer, tab across, and here we're going to look up information from the customer table. So again, we're okay for the first part, look up information in a table or query, that's okay, click next again, and this time make sure the customers table is highlighted, click on next, and there we have all the fields available in our customer table. And this time I'm going to move across the customer ID, the first name and the last name, so there's three fields. Click on next again, and here I get the sorting option, and I'm going to select last name this time, sorted on the customer's last name. Next again, and there's a preview of what I will see when I click on my drop down selector, as you will see later on when I go into the table data entry view. Again, there's the key column hidden. I can untick if I want to see that, but it's not recommended. So we will move on, and there's the name for my lookup column, customer, which is perfectly okay. I can rename that later on if I want to, but that will do for now, and click on finish. And again, Access warns me that the table must be saved again before the relationship is created, so just say fine to that. Well, it doesn't say fine, you click on yes obviously, but I think there should be a button that says fine. So we've now linked this table to our other two tables, and it will become clear later on why we've done that. And I'm now going to continue with this table and just fill in the rest of the fields. So the next one is going to the rental fee for this transaction, and that's going to be currency, so I can just type the letter C and that brings up currency, tab through again. The due date is obviously the date the movie should be brought back, so that's going to be date again, D for date, tab through. We want to say whether the film was returned or not, and this is going to be a yes no field, so I press the letter Y on the keyboard, brings up yes no, and I also want to know the actual date it was returned. and that will help us work out if there's a late fee due later on. So that's going to be a date and time as well. And that basically is our table. So I'm not going to add the late fee on here, as I said. So those are all the fields that I need. Now I haven't at the moment set any properties, and I'm going to go through these fields one by one to set the properties. The rental ID is fine, don't need to change that. The date of rental, I'm going to make that a what shall I set? Short date. There we go, keep it simple. And I'm also going to put a default value into here. And to do that, I'm going to type in date and an open and close bracket. And what that will do is it'll automatically put in today's date into the field for me. So logically, if somebody brings up a transaction form, for example, it's probably going to be for the current day. So just to save the user a bit of time, that date can be put in automatically by Access. Okay, so I'm not going to bother with validation rules and text, but I will say that it's required. So yes to that. Won't bother with the index, as I've mentioned before. So if we move down to the movie rented, which is the link to the movies table, it says default value 0. Then I'm going to delete that, so I don't want the 0 to appear. And I will say it's a required field. Okay, so I'll just set that to yes. And that's all I need to do for that one. The customer, I will do the same thing, so I'll come back and delete the 0 that Access has put in. And I'm going to say it's required as well. Okay, the rental fee, the default value is 0 at the moment. I was going to leave that. I could leave it at 0, but I'm going to delete that and make it blank. And I will also say it is a requirement to enter the fee. So moving back, we have due date as the next field. And default value, won't bother with that. Required will be yes. And if I come back up, actually, I need to set the format, don't I? So the format, we're going to set short date again. Come down to the next field, returned, yes, no. I'm going to leave that exactly as it is. Okay, so even though it will be required, it won't be required until the customer brings back the movie, so I can't make it required initially, otherwise you won't be able to enter any information on the form for this table. And again, the return date, if I just come back to that final one, the format will be the same as previously, so short date. And this time I won't make it a requirement for the same reason that obviously you can't enter in the return date before the customer takes it away, so that will have to be something that is entered later on, and you have to trust your staff to enter that information. Well, I have to anyway. Okay, so that's all done, I reckon, and I'm going to click on the save button again just to update my saved table. Click on the data entry view, and the first thing you'll notice here is that I've got date of rental already entered. Now I can now click in the movie rented column and get the drop down arrow, click the drop down, and there is Star Wars from my movies table. It's the only film I've got, so I better choose that one. Click into the customer table, click the drop down arrow, there's Tom Smith, my only customer at the moment, so choose that. Now you'll notice that when I choose that, although it shows Tom Smith, it only puts Tom into the customer field. Now in reality, behind the scenes, there's actually a reference number in there that we can't see. So we see the first name, but when we come to set the forms up, we will create a more friendly way of seeing this information, so don't worry about that at the moment. The rental fee I will set as $2.99 for the sake of argument. Tab across to due date. Now I'm going to set the due date as 3 days from the original date, so I shall put 28th of October in there. Press the enter key. And the last two fields obviously I cannot complete until the customer has returned the film, so I will leave those for now. So that's it. So I can just click away from that record into the next record, and that will be automatically saved, as you know. So just notice one error. The rental fee should be $2.99, not $2.96. So I'm just going to click on the highlight the fee there and type in $2.99. Enter, and there we are, we're done. Just click away again. I can now close the table, and that essentially is the setup for my database. So I now have all three tables, and what I'd like to show you here is the relationship between those tables. And if on the Access toolbar, I click the Relationships button. That will open the Relationships window, and you can see here in a graphical display how those tables are linked. So you can see the movies table, the rental table, and the customers table, and in each of those you can see all the fields. Scroll up and down, display the field names, and you can also see here this little line that connects the tables. So you can see as I move the rentals field list up and down, you can see that line moves because it's linked, it's locked onto the customer field in the customers table is locked onto the customer field in the rentals table. Likewise, the movie ID field in the movies table is locked to the movie rented field in the rentals table. And again, if I scroll up and down there, you'll see that line on either side move up and down as it tries to hold on to the linked field. So that essentially is a relational database. And the purpose of a relational database is to help you organize the information, so you can separate the information out into discrete tables, so you're not repeatedly entering information. So anytime I need to add a movie, I go to my movies table. Anytime I need to add a customer, I go to my customer table. And anytime I make a rental transaction, I use my rentals table, which links into the other two. Hopefully that makes sense, but that is essentially how Access works. It can get a lot more complicated, it can get a lot more simple if you just use one table, for example. But I do recommend that if you create a database in any real world scenario, that you look at the data and think about how you can break that information up into separate tables, just to make life easier for yourself when you're working with the data later on in forms or reports, etc., as we will see. So I'll close the window down, and as you see, Access says, do you want to save changes to the layout of relationships? This has got nothing to do with how your database works. It's purely this particular view of the tables. Now, the reason it says, do you want to change the layout, is if you imagine that we have maybe 6, 7, even 10 tables or more. It's not unusual. It can get a bit chaotic in this view, and so you might want to organize your tables in a particular way, and Access allows you to save that layout. So for the sake of this example, I will save that layout, so just click on yes, and it closes that view. So that's our tables created, and the next step is to create some forms to make the data entry process a bit more friendly for the users. So thanks for watching this tutorial. I hope you found some things in there that were useful. Subscribe if you would like to keep up to date with my future tutorials, and if you want to make a comment on things you would like to see in future tutorials or questions you might have about this one, by all means leave them down below. So thanks again, and see you next time.